Good YIWH, everyone. Shavua Tov. Thank you all for coming, both those who are live and those who are watching on Zoom. It's special to have each and every one of you here with us to share a night of chizuk, of strength, of inspiration, encouragement to one another. Somebody commented to me only a couple of days ago that as our esteemed Morah D'Asra, Rabbi Kelemer Zatzal's first Yahrtzeit approaches, it's the end of a year. And the truth is, while that might be partially true, I beg to differ. Because I believe in my heart of hearts, and I think we all have to recognize this and understand it, it's only the beginning. Because there is not enough that we can do and should do to be able to give kavod to his neshama, and most importantly, to perpetuate his legacy as our manhig, as our leader, as our inspiration, as our model of Torah and midos tovos and ruchnius. To begin tonight, I'd like to ask our president to say a few words on behalf of the entire Kehillah.
One year ago, I stood in the same spot representing our membership at the Levaya of Rabbi Kelemer, Yahrtzeit, our Rav, our Rebbe, our leader, our teacher, and our friend. Over the course of the last 12 months, our community has mourned his incredible loss. Our chizuk comes from reflecting on our Rav, the midos Rabbi Kelemer taught us towards each other, the lessons from the Torah he explained, the chesed he did near and far, going long distances to see people during illness or shiva. May it have been for a simcha or someone in need of refuah, Rabbi Kelemer, Yahrtzeit, was always there. The hours he would give to a person to hear the stories, the respect he would give to people by listening to them, no matter who they were, are just some examples of the characteristics of our Rav. There have been so many stories from so many people over the course of not only a year, but a lifetime. I was in Florida 2 months ago, and I met an individual who used to live in West Hempstead and moved to Cleveland. He told me how Rabbi Kelemer called him as he was going to Chicago for a wedding and got lost and ended up in Cleveland. He was so honored that Rabbi Kelemer remembered him and called him to catch up and get information regarding the closest minyan for him to attend. He felt so proud that he could offer assistance to the Rav, who always gave assistance to others. Another person just approached me recently and told me the first time he ever saw Rabbi Kelemer was at a Shalom Zachar. It was 9 p.m. when our Rav walked in. Shabbos started at 5 p.m. Everyone made such a big deal about Rabbi Kelemer coming to a Shalom Zachar. This person thought to himself, he's the Rav of the community. Why is everyone so amazed he walked in? Until he found out that the Rav had yet to be home and just walked in from visiting someone in a local hospital. How many times have we heard of stories about Rav being asked to Shaila and his first response, what did your parents and grandparents do? He had such a respect for past generations and a family's mitzvah. That's our Rav. Always knew the right answer. Knew exactly what to say, knew exactly how to treat people. He knew how to relate to each and every individual. Every family has their private stories of time spent with Rabbi Kelemer that they will cherish forever. We all felt such a tremendous closeness to him. What an immense privilege. We appreciated our Rav, and we knew how fortunate we were to have him. When you lose someone, you realize even more so how fortunate you were and wish you could have had more time with him. This has been a year of firsts for all of us. First Yontifs without Rabbi Kelemer leading the way, weddings he wasn't there to officiate and dance at, bar and bar mitzvahs, children and their families who miss hearing his praise, children born who did not have the privilege of being named by him, and mourners who felt their loss doubly, not having Rabbi Kelemer to be by their side to give chizuk as well as guidance. We have had we have, as a community, survived these first. But having the knowledge that Rabbi Kelemer is with us, watching over us, and being a Melitz Yosher for our community, as well as for all Klal Yisrael. He is not here with us physically, but when we come together in Achdus, his light continues to shine with all of us. We as a community will grow and continue to get stronger. We will continue to carry forward the midos which Rav taught us. As I stated last year to Rebbetzin Kelemer and the rest of the family, thank you for sharing Rabbi Kelemer with us for all those years. We were truly blessed to have him with us. He is the reason West Hempstead is the community it is. May the neshama of Rabbi Yehuda Kelemer, Zecher Tzalach L'Bracha, have an aliyah.
I thank everyone for coming tonight. I want to particularly single out the community rabbis and all rabbanim who are here. We are true partners, and really, Rabbi Kelemer was the one who gave us a sense of unified mission and brought us all together so often. Before I introduce our next speaker, it's important to give Hakaras HaTov to the entire Kelemer family. Not just because having the Rebbetzin here every day, every week, and every month elevates our shul and community. Her warmth and smile, kavod for each and every person is truly inspirational. And her regal nature truly elevates our shul each time she is here. And we are very fortunate, so fortunate to have her continue as a role model for all of us. I want to thank the entire family, the children in particular, in the last few months, last year, for their friendship and guidance. Without all of you, we would not have known the proper way to memorialize and give kavod to Rabbi Kelemer Zatzal's neshama, to find the right way to express each and every piece of the last year. You have held our hands and always given us the right way to go about every single step. And for that friendship, partnership, and support, we are truly grateful and indebted to all of you. I hope and pray, Amir Hashem, that you continue to grace our shul and community for many years to come with your presence, your divrei Torah, your ruchnius, your smiles, and your warmth. And we look forward, Amir Hashem, to sharing many simchas together, hopefully besuros sovos, and continuing to use all of you as our guide in perpetuating Rabbi Kelemer's memory for many years to come. On behalf of the family, we are privileged and honored to hear tonight words of inspiration, of chizuk from Rabbi Berel Kelemer.
I want to learn with you a Gemara and Brachos episode that's brought down in Gemara and Brachos. I would like to tell you my difficulty on the Gemara and attempt to give an answer and an approach of understanding this Gemara. The Gemara is in Brachos Daf Mem Beis on the Beis. The Gemara says that when Rav was nifter, when Rav passed away, so his Talmidim went with the Aron to bury him in a different city. And when they're on the way back from the Kavura, so they said they wanted to sit down together and eat bread. So the Gemara says they're by the banks of a certain river, and they washed, they ate, and then they wanted to know if they should all bench with the Zimun. Are they all connected? Are they one group? Or they're all single individuals as far as the benching is concerned, and they should all bench separately. So the Gemara tells us, because their doubt was, because the Mishnah says when people recline, in those days they reclined when they ate. So when people recline, that means they're having a set meal. What we call kviyos in Hebrew. And because of that, if everyone's reclining, it's an official Suda, so then everybody, it's all one unit, one person benches as a mezuzah. But perhaps over here in this case, they weren't. They were just on the banks of a river, very happenstance. But perhaps the fact that they said, let's all sit down and eat together, that might be sufficient to have created a bond, a group, a unit, and perhaps they should bench as a group with a zimun. Gemara tells us that Rabbi Yehuda, one of the students, when they were deciding and they weren't sure about the Shiloh, the Gemara says he got up and he took his beged, his clothing that he already had ripped kriya for his Rebbe, and he turned it he pushed it to go to the back, and he made a kriya and he ripped kriya again another time. And he said that our Rebbe was nifter, noch nafshke the Rav was nifter, and we don't even know the bracha, the proper bracha, the birchas hamazon, and what to do in this situation. That's what the Gemara says. My difficulty with the Gemara is that when Rav was nifter, when Rav passed away, so obviously his Talmidim understood that his passing leaves them a void, leaves them in a situation where they're not going to have answers to the shilohs anymore. And I'm assuming when they tore kriya at that moment, they had that in mind also. So yes, this was the first time that they had a situation, a fresh situation since Rab passed away. This is the first time that they felt it, so to say. But is that a reason to rip kriya again? They already knew that this was what they lost. Why should they have to rip kriya again a second time? And the second question is, why was only Rav Yehuda bar Ava? What about all the other Talmidim? They didn't rip their garments when they were in this doubt and they're not sure what they should do in this situation. Only Rav Yehuda bar Ava ripped his clothing. Why? Why only him? I believe the answer might be hidden in the hashgacha, in the divine providence of the question. Meaning, of all questions that they should have right when Rav passed away, it was the question of, are they considered one group or are they not considered one group? I believe that what the Gemara is telling us is that Rav Yehuda bar Ava realized another dimension in the Avelus and in the loss of his Rebbe. Of course, when he ripped kriya originally, he understood that his Rebbe was nifter and there's not going to be any more answering of shilas, and that it was all included in the first kriya, the first time he ripped his clothing. But he realized now that the fact that they were one chabura, they were one unit, they were one group, was because of Rav, it was because he was the Rebbe. And he was the glue that held everybody together. And now that the Rav was nifter and they have a shiloh, if they're considered a zimun, is because they don't know if they're a unit now. Who's going to keep them together? The Rav isn't here, the Rebbe's not here, who's going to keep them together? That's why he ripped kriya a second time, because then they realized the enormity of the patira of Rav, or the loss of Rav. This famous Gemara, we say, Amar Lazar and Chanina, Talmidei Chachamim Arvim Shalom Ba'olam. Talmidei Chachamim bring Shalom into the world. Shenemar, V'chol B'nayich Talmidei Hashem V'rav Shalom B'nayich, Al Triki B'nayich Ala B'nayich. Talmidei Chachamim bring Shalom into the world because we interpret the verse B'nayich to mean B'nayich, builders. Not just children, but builders. Rav Shalom B'nayich, they build and they bring shalom into the world. The message of Rabbi Lazar and Chanina is that the only way to build Torah, the only way to build kehilos, the only way to build yeshivas, Torah institutions, is through shalom. A builder knows that he has to have a strong foundation. If the foundation is not strong, the whole building collapses. Talmid Chacham Ma'arvim Shalom Ba'olam, they're Ma'arvim Shalom Ba'olam because they're bonoya, because they're builders. And they lay the foundation of their buildings with shalom, with peace. My father Zatzal was a builder. He was a boina, he was a builder. He built the community of West Hempstead. He built the community of West Hempstead in a unique way that West Hempstead is. How special it is. It's a star and a gem amongst all the communities of Klal Yisrael. He built it with sweat and tears, and he built it with minimal sleep. He built it with people like yourselves, people who value unity and want shalom and want that should be a cohesive kehillah. He built the kehillah by giving up from himself, giving up from his kavod, his honor. Everything meant nothing to him if it was a question of shalom, if it was a question of peace. He would even give up his own honor as long as he could create peace and shalom amongst people and create more an environment of healthy living. Like Talmidim of the Rebbe, you, the members of the shul, of the whole community, you that live in West Hempstead, you observed and you watched him. And you watched how his sensitivity in the way he passed in the Shiloh. And you saw how he approached the question completely different than you think he would. With every calculation taken into account. Whether it was an almana or a widow, that was part of the cheshbon, that was part of the calculation. How he approached the Shiloh with such sensitivity. You saw how he spoke to people with such sensitivity. And you learned from that. You all are his Talmidim. You learned. Little by little, you became the Talmidim, and you yourselves became like that. That's why West Hempstead is so special. But just like the Gemara says, when the Talmidim of Rav, Adabar Rava realized that Rav is not here anymore, and there's not going to be the glue amongst the people. The living example that my father was, the fact that every day, again, you could see another sheer in what it means to be sensitive to another Jew. Whether you see it, whether you hear it from your neighbor, whether they were talking about it on the train, the stories went all over the place. But you saw it, you looked at him, and his whole essence said that to you. But he's not here, there's no living example anymore. You have to keep the memories alive. You have to keep his Torah Shabbat, his Torah that he said, textually, he gave shiurim, his drushes, his speeches, his sermons, his Torah Shabbat Peh, the way he spoke to people, the way he acted. You have to keep those Torahs, you have to keep that alive in your memory. You constantly remember what he did and what he used to do. It's like learning a piece of Gemara. You have to review it in order to be koneh, to really absorb it. You have to constantly review it. I grew up in West Hempstead. To say that I love West Hempstead is an understatement. So I implore you, Talmidim of my father, to keep his memory alive. The Gemara says that Yaakov Avinu lo meis, Yaakov Avinu didn't die. And the Gemara explains that to mean Ma'azaro b'chayim, just like his children are alive, so too Yaakov is alive. His Zaro, his children, his Talmidim, all of you can keep him alive. Someone could walk into this shul and feel his presence, all because of keeping those memories alive. Azaro b'chayim. If you're b'chayim, if you keep it, you're keeping him alive. And if your memory fades and you start forgetting, you could always speak to my mother. Besides being a Biton Shal Gedalim, granddaughter of the Prince Berel of Beisaran, besides being an Aish's Chaver, a wife of a tremendous Goller to my father, Litzal, she has her own yichus. And I can guarantee you that if you want to know what my father said, you could ask my mother, because whatever she's going to tell you is what my father would have said. Yehi Zichar Baruch.
Can we call out 3 in the morning? In the first parak of Pirkei Avos is a very simple but puzzling Mishnah. I'll read to you just part of the Mishnah, or most of the Mishnah. Shimon HaTzadik haya mishyarei anshikens hagadola. Shimon HaTzadik was one of the last remaining vestiges of the Great Assembly. Hu haya omer. He used to say, Al shlosha dvarim ha'olam omed. On 3 things the world stands. Al Torah, al ha'avoda, al milos chesed. On Torah, self-explanatory. Avoda, zutfila, milos chesedim, chesed, kindness. 2 simple questions on this Mishnah. The great posek of the 14th century Spain, the Rivash, raised the question. I'm sure every Tana in all of Pirkei Avos was a Tzadik. I have no doubt. But he's the only one, Shimon, who's called Shimon HaTzadik. And number 2, fast forward 500 years. For Moshe Wolfson in Torah Vadas, in the Sefer and Pirkei Avos, he asks, we're also told it was the last vestige of the Great Assembly. Why is that important for us to know? Does it affect the statement in the Mishnah, his mantra in the Mishnah? Why is that important for us to know? The Mefarshim explain that Shimon HaTzadik had a few things going for him that nobody else could claim as their own. During his 40 or so years as a manning of Klal Yisrael, the middle candle of the menorah continued to burn. They put the same amount of oil in consistently, but it never went out. And for all those years as well, Chazal tell us that a small kazayis, a lechem upon him, satisfied each and every Kohen. When he passed away, that ceased to exist. The menorah didn't burn as smoothly, and people needed more bread to subsist. And the reason is because to be a tzaddik is not just to be a tzaddik for oneself. That is not what a tzaddik is. It's a word that is used all too often, by myself included. All of my children are my little tzaddik. My talmidim, my talmidos, tzaddik and tzaddikes. But truthfully, the word is overused. A tzaddik is a person who isn't just righteous for themselves, accomplish a lot, great Talmud Chacham, a great Bal Midos, the Bal Mofes, can do wonders. That's not a tzaddik. A tzaddik is an individual who makes a roshem, an impact on everyone around them. Shimon HaTzadik was a tzaddik because of the menorah lechem apanim. Many others benefited from his tzidkus. And that is the definition of a tzaddik. We are told he was the last vestige of the Great Assembly, who gave us takanos, enactments, halachos, misadri, tefillah, and many thought when they disappeared, that would be the end of Klal Yisrael as we knew it. So comes Shimon, the great Tzadik, who impacted so many people around him, and said, it's not over. Because those same people gave us 3 ways to perpetuate their legacy and their memory. Torah, Gemilus, Chasadim. Right? Kelemer Zatzal embodied, epitomized these 2 thoughts on the Mishnah. We've heard the word Tzadik passed around many times about many people. It's a loose translation. Rabbi Kelemer was a Tzadik also because, but mostly because his tzidkus impacted every single person around him. Look at this amazing community. The impact is profound and everlasting. Not one person can claim they weren't refined or changed or impacted because of that amazing tzidkus that emanated from him. Truly a tzaddik, he epitomizes and defines the word. He's a paradigm of a tzaddik because of what he did for all of us and continues to do for all of us. And lastly, Ashreinu Matov Chalkenu. How fortunate are we? As Berel said a moment ago, we have a charge and a mission. And it's not an easy one, but it's an important one. And that charge is, in all the many ways, and there's so more than just 3. These are Rashi Prakim. But in so many ways, Rabbi Kelemer Zatzal gave us the tools to continue to perpetuate all that he stood for and taught us and inspired us with. As a Talmid Chacham, he elevated all of us in Limud HaTorah. I challenge you to find any other shul or community where the average person walking down the street, male, female, old or young, has a Seder in Limud daily, like our Kehillah, our community does. And it's because everyone had the opportunity to watch a quintessential, refined Talmid Chacham carry himself with sensitivity and incredible amelus dedication to Torah learning. He inspired us in Torah. In Tefillah, who can forget the soft tone when there was too much talking in shul, and there's still too much talking in shul. And he would get up at the bima, and he would softly remind us that the word we were up to, the paragraph we were up to, the importance of thinking of cholim, whom we know, whom we don't know, who so badly need our tefillah, and how could we squander the opportunity and talk to our neighbor? That was avoda. And Gemilus Chasadim speaks for itself. We shared yesterday countless stories, and there's so many more. Berel said they'll be published in Yahrtzeit Hashem, and we need to hear them. Countless stories of going above and beyond of all hours of the night to help people in stress, in need, going through difficulties, illness, struggles. The chesed was unparalleled. And again, he was the paradigm. He defines what a Baal Chesed is. That was legacy of Shimon HaTzadik. And that's the legacy of our Tzadik, Rabbi Kelemer Zatzal. Ashreinu Matov Chalkenu. We are truly blessed because he has given us the tools to continue his mission and his legacy. And it's our sacred task to be able to do so. We all hope and pray that we have the vision and the strength and the wisdom to continue to focus on these three pillars and so many more that he modeled for us, embodied for us, and taught us. And through doing so, we will bring Amir Hashem many more years of kavod, his neshama, and continue to build, as Berel said, this amazing community at Bias Goel Tzadik. To segue this evening, Yibada L'chaim is a perfect segue. If we're talking tonight, a moment ago, about a person who their tzidkus is able to not just be to themselves, but is used to elevate people around them and an entire community. I can't think of a more fitting speaker tonight than our speaker, Moshe Weinberg. He has transformed the community of Woodmere, his Kila Aish Kodesh, but really the Five Towns community, and I would add the Jewish community as a whole. His focus on passionate tefillah, on becoming an elevated, refined Jew with true sense of ruchnius, of elevation, is truly also unparalleled. His tzidkus has spread to so many thousands of talmidim and so many people who follow his every word. And so it's our great kavod, honor tonight, and so appropriate tonight to hear divrei chizuk, words of inspiration, of strength from Rav Moshe Weinberg, the Rav Kila Aish Kodesh.
B'shus, you wonderful Rav, Reish Karl, Rabbi Kelemer of the Zon Zion, the Bnei HaMishpach who are here, my chavrei, brothers, friends, sisters. I don't know why I was asked to speak at such an occasion. The Yahrtzeit of Tzadik of Yehuda Kelemer. It's true, I'm a neighbor. I've been watching this Kehillah for many years. Many friends, grew up learning with, playing ball with. I'm always hearing Rabbi Kelemer, Rabbi Kelemer. I was lucky to have a few conversations with him and learning. But I'll maybe use a few minutes as an opportunity to try to unravel a mystery, something I've been thinking about for so many years. The mystery of the Jews of West Hempstead. It's a pella, it's a wonder to me. My wife, she should be well, my wife taught in SKA. From the first day the school opened, she was a teacher there until a few years ago. And she would always say that the girls are all wonderful. But there's something about the West Hempstead Chavit. There's something different about the West Hempstead Chavit. And it's true. And I've always felt that when I'm in yeshiva. I could almost tell by how some boys are talking to each other. It's a West Hempstead boy. There's a certain humility, a certain sweetness, a certain gentleness of spirit, an openness. And I've discussed this with some people.
Did you come to West Hempstead that way? You were drawn to West Hempstead? Were you transformed by being in this community, by being here? So I'm a Tzaddik, an outsider, just trying to understand the wonder of West Hempstead. I suppose that you often have to shop at some of our stores, even though you have some places here also. But you probably have to occasionally struggle in the parking lot by Gourmet Glatt and so on. But you are a people that are apart, they're different. And I want to understand that. How did that happen to you? What happened over here? There's a lot of talk over the past years about two types of love. Conditional love. Ahava tluya b'davar would be a loose translation. Conditional love and unconditional love. Even though generalizations are always dangerous and inaccurate, nevertheless, we do learn something from typologies and trying to make distinctions between, in this case, the love of a father and the love of a mother for a child. Unfortunately, I've dealt very often with Yisayimim, with children who no longer have a parent or no longer have parents. Hashem Yirach. Just last week, there was a levaya of a student of mine. I was involved in the shidduch. His mother passed away 7 years ago, and the father passed away last week. He's 20 years old, and he's by himself. No grandparents. When the child is missing his or her father, it's unbearable. It's very difficult to continue. But when the mother has left the world, it's almost impossible for the child to breathe, to envision going on with life at all. The love of a father, as deep, again, it's a generalization. The love of a father, as deep, as profound as it is, Saf Chasav, isn't boundless, isn't the same love, the unconditional love of a mother. And we relate to the Rebbeinu Shalom in two ways. The Rebbeinu Shalom is our Father, Avinu, Shebashamayim, he's our Father. And the Shekhinah HaKadosh is our mother. And as a loving father, the Rebbeinu Shalom has set certain conditions and rules that we would be worthy of his love and affection. The Rebbeinu Shalom says that if you follow in my ways, my mitzvahs, the Torah goes on, and so on, then your lives will be filled with brachas. So our Father, the Rebbeinu Shalom, sets certain conditions. That word im, if, that condition, the contingency, if. Then you could expect a life filled with brachas. And if not, there are many psukim in B'chukai that describe if not. But when it comes to the Shekhinah Kodesh, when it comes to our mother, the Shekhinah, this of course is all one. When it comes to the Shekhinah, L'Shem Yichuchu Shekhinah. When it comes to the Shekhinah Kodesh, to our mother, so the Shekhinah says, "V'af gam zois beretz oiveihem, ve'yoisem eretz oiveihem, lo imahastim lo galtim l'chaloisa." No matter what, even if you're so far from me, and you've become mixed amongst the nations of the world, your enemies, lo imahastim lo galtim. Chazal tell us in the Medrash and the Zohar Kodesh, the pasuk is talking about when we're in a very, very low place. We're in a place of not. Lo galtim, lo imahastim lo galtim. I'll never, ever, ever turn away from you. We discussed it with you. I'll never, ever ignore the bris, forget the covenant, the bris. This bris means, as it says in the pasuk, the Shekhinah Kodesh says, our mother says, I'm with you, I'm in your tumah. I'm with you in the tumah of Mitzrayim. I'm with you in the tumah of your personal life, the impurity, the defilement. I'll never ever leave you. I remember that many years ago, our children were little. So I was sitting and learning in the study. And one of the children, she was a baby in the crib, was crying. And I went to see what was going on. And it was a terrible sight to behold. We're in a Makom Kodesh, I can't describe it. She was, thank God, healthy, but there was a mess that she had made all over. And it went beyond the boundaries of sanitation. And she was also playing, and parents know what this is. Grandparents remember what it is. And I went into the room, and the stench and the sight was too awful for me to behold. And what I usually do when I'm in trouble is I just either whisper or call out my wife's name. She's known by her English name in the world, Myrna, but I call her Michla. That's her Hebrew name. And I said, Michla. And she had been on the phone. She came running into the hall. She thought something was wrong. And I just said, I defer. I can't do this. Soyas Bas Sion, it's called in Tanakh. There is such a thing. The filth of the daughter of Zion. And you know how when a wife gives the husband that sweet look at how useless you are. And I stepped away. I went back. And I went past in the hall a few minutes later, and my wife was with our daughter, and it was all over her now as well. And I heard her saying the words, I accept upon myself the mitzvah of loving another Jew. She didn't know that I heard that. And I asked her later on. And she said to me, look, it was pretty awful. But the baby's also a Jew. And there's a mitzvah of that when there's a person who's helpless, and there's no one more helpless than an infant, then even if it's the most disgusting mess in the world, she said it's the greatest privilege as her mother to clean that mess. There's something else when it comes to a mother. There are no ims. The ima doesn't have an im. a condition. Where the father might be sometimes disgusted, and he finds the tumah unbearable, the child's mistakes, the child's chutzpah sometimes unbearable. The Shekhinah HaKadosh of the mother never ever walks away. Now, in Knesset Yisrael, in Am Yisrael, the Anhage, the leadership of our people, is rooted in this parsha, in these parashiyas. Moshe Rabbeinu was not only our Rebbe, Moshe Rabbeinu is our father. And regarding Moshe Rabbeinu, the Gemara brings the pasuk or brings the maimer, Yikov Hadines Ahar. Moshe Rabbeinu was a man of halacha. Even though Chazal tell us, Oyev Yisrael Haya, he was a great lover of the Jewish people, but he was a man of very few words. Lo Aish devar manoich. You'll notice that the final letters of those words, Loi, Ish, Devar Manoich, he spells Shammai. Like Shammai Hazaken. Moshe Rabbeinu's Mida, Yikov Hadinus Ahar, our teacher, exacting, clear, demanding, the morale in Gurus Hashem and Paraches and Gurus Hashem. The morale speaks about Moshe Rabbeinu's inability to communicate. The Kvad Peh. Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't speak as regular people. And the morale explains that there is this overpowering ruchnius. Moshe Rabbeinu was not entirely of this world. Ish Elokim. Like when Meir Simcha talks about Nagdama, Tishmois, Meshkachma. That means Ish Elokim. Moshe Rabbeinu was not entirely grounded in this world. He wasn't of this world. And because of that, the tzura, the neshama, the ruchnius of Moshe Rabbeinu was so illuminated that speech, which requires the interfacing of the guf, of the body and of the soul, of chomer and of tzura, of physical and spiritual life, and Moshe Rabbeinu was different, and therefore he couldn't express who he was. He couldn't bring out the depth of his being in words. Lo Yish Devar Manoichi, because of his greatness. And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu had a brother. Now tonight I'm not going to go into the sugi of Miriam. She's part of this. That's a whole other conversation. Not for now. Aaron HaKohen is hu yelechol lepeh. Hu yelechol lepeh. You'll notice that the Rashi Tevis of Hillel. The Shammai and Hillel. The Shtalshlus of Moshe, of Shammai, Moshe Rabbeinu, and Hillel, Aaron HaKohen. Hu yelechol lepeh. Hillel Yoyme having me tell me the Shal Aaron. Hillel used to say, we should be from the Talmidim of Aaron. And that's who Hillel himself was. Chesed ve'emes nifgoshu, Chazal say, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe emes, v'serosei emes. Absolute truth, uncompromising, unequivocal truth. Moshe emes v'serosei emes. Aaron is chesed. Aaron is levarach. There's some kahanim over here, right? This matters. Well, Hashem, I davened with Svardim yesterday. It was a shiva, but I was able to daven with Svardim and to hear the words, levarach es Am Yisrael v'ahav. The world of kahuna The world of the Kohen, the world of Aaron, is a world of Ahava, of infinite, unconditional love. Therefore, even though Moshe Rabbeinu loved us, and every father loves his children, and the Rebbe loves his Talmidim, so Sof Kol Sof, Moshe Rabbeinu was Nisha Lakim. Moshe Rabbeinu lived in a world that was separate from everybody else. He possessed what the Maral calls a Seichel Nivdal Eloki, a mind that was transcendent, that was godly. And because of that, the Yiru Megeshes love, the people were afraid to approach him. And at some point in his life, when he came down to us, he had to wear a mask to separate between himself and the people. And where he went, even Aaron, his brother, and the Zakanim could not go. The Yiru Megeshes Eila. And in that world of Moshe Rabbeinu and Moshe Emes, the Sirosai Emes, Moshe Rabbeinu was lonely and was alone. He was different. He lived in that world with the Bari Olam, with the Creator. And when he came back from that place, he was never the same, and he couldn't return even to regular family life. And he was never really understood. There always needed to be explanation, interpretation, and it continues to this day. That was our Rebbe and our father, Moshe Rabbeinu. But Aaron HaKohen was like our mother. And the mother, Yodea Yitzram Kehem Bosav Adam. The mother is more attuned to the limitations of her children. Her expectations are molded by those limitations and by the infinite love, sometimes that even blinds her in certain ways. But Aaron was our mother, and he was Medaber B'Loshen Amma. He spoke Mamalosh. Mama also stands for Melech Malchei Hamlachim, his mom. And Aaron spoke the Loshen of the Shechina HaKadosh. Aaron spoke Mamalosh. And therefore, Aaron was the one who would bring Moshe Rabbeinu down to us, who would bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will to us in a way that we could live with, that we could understand. And while Moshe Rabbeinu was breaking luchos, Aaron HaKohen is stalling and waiting somehow. Maybe things will turn around. And the Zohar Kodesh is Magdir, this distinction defines this distinction in a very clear way. The Moshe Rabbeinu was the Shoshvina de Malka. He was Hashem's best man. Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who accompanies HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the world. Who received the Torah. He's the best man of the Chassan. Moshe Rabbeinu is the Shoshvina de Malka. But Aaron HaKohen is the bridesmaid. Aaron HaKohen is the one who brings the kala. That means me and you with the kala. Aaron HaKohen is the one who helps us to get out of bed, to get on our toes and to reach for something better than who we are right now. Aaron HaKohen is the mother that's filled with words of encouragement. It's filled with lullabies and songs. The mother who puts a little note into the lunchbox or the lunch bag with a smiley. That's the world of Aaron HaKohen. So, Chevra, now let's begin to head towards the end. What is it that's required of a man? What is it that's required? What does Hashem expect? What does he want of a Jewish leader? A manhig means a manhig b'Yisrael, a rav, a mashpia, in the home, a parent, in the classroom, a rebbe, a morah, a teacher, a yeshiva, a rebbe, so it says beferish in the parasha. Right now in our parasha it says, "Hu Aaron u'Moshe asher amar Hashem lehem, v'yitziu es bnei Yisrael mi'esh Mitzrayim al tzivoisam." So Rashi, of course, and all of us notice right away, it's odd, "Hu Aaron u'Moshe." Here it says Aaron Moshe. In other places it says Moshe and Aaron, Aaron Moshe, Moshe Aaron. So everybody knows Rashi says, Yesh mekoyim shemakdim Aaron leMoshe. There are some places we find that Aaron's name comes before Moshe. Yesh mekoyim shemakdim Moshe leAaron. There are other places in Tanakh where first Moshe's name is mentioned and then Aaron occurs. Why this reversal? Why does this happen? So Rashi says, Loi malach sheshkulen ke'echad. Loi malach sheshkulen ke'echad. To teach us that Moshe and his brother, that Moshe and Aaron are Kohen, Moshe, Aaron, Moshe, Moshe, Aaron. Sheshkulen ke'echad, the two of them are indispensable. The father and the mother. Sheshkulen ke'echad. And there's no stira, chalila, at all between the two. The Torah wants a manig b'Yisrael, a Jewish leader, a rebbe, a teacher, a parent. The Torah wants that person should be a Moshe Rabbeinu, to be a person, again, that's unequivocal, uncompromising, truth, Moshe emes, v'seroso emes, demanding expectations, occasionally, and maybe even more than occasionally, critiquing, even criticizing Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, like the Creator, knows that the world is imperfect. And although he tolerates the imperfection, his entire life is given to perfection and to perfecting that which is imperfect. That's the Moshe Rabbeinu side of a Jewish leader, the father. And that Moshe Rabbeinu part of a Jewish leader means that even though the Rebbe, of course, has to come down from his place and to communicate and connect with his Talmidim, or a teacher, the Talmidos, and so on, nevertheless, that doesn't mean that you become like the Talmud. It's one thing to toss a ball with the Talmud, it's another thing to become a child yourself. I remember the look of horror in my father's eyes when he came in to visit once, many years ago. And I was on the floor playing with my two kids, and I had one of them was on my back, and I was giving a ride like a horse. My father at the time didn't say anything. Let me just forward this way to give you a little bit of a notification. My father was not from America. My father's not American. My father is a Hungarian survivor. Came from also a different, not a different world, a different galaxy. And later my father pulled me aside and said, "What were you doing before?" I said, "When?" He said, "When I came in, you're on your knees." I said, "I was giving a ride to the kids." He said, "A father doesn't go on his knees like that. He's not a horse." He said, "A fair goes like that, not a father." Okay, now I'm not saying you could use that now. And maybe that's another conversation. My father was a big Tzadik. And he continued on with the way that he was taught. That was the Messiah that he received before everything was cut short. You don't become a child. Moshe Emes V'Serasa Emes means that Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbe, the Jewish leader, has to be a person who is apart, in certain ways alone. Because if you're not different, if you're not alone, if you're not apart, if you're not elevated, if you're not a few tefachim above the ground, then how are you supposed to bring the chevra up to a higher place? But could you imagine a mother that doesn't get down on the floor? Could you imagine that there would be a mother who would stand apart from a child? The whole inyan of the mother is, of Aaron HaKohen is, Ba'asher Hu Sham, like in Rabbi Nachman's story of the prince who thought that he was a Turkey. I'm sure many of you know the story. And the Chacham, nobody could convince him that he wasn't Meshigah, and nobody could convince the Turkey. The prince was under the table pecking at food. He thought he was a turkey. And the only one who was able to help him was that the Chacham himself came, and he went under the table. He made believe he was a turkey also. And through that, he was able to remind the prince that he was really a prince. And the mother is Ba'asher Hu Sham. The mother is the one, Aaron HaKohen is the one, Merachem En Yanhigem, who's filled with Rachmanis, with compassion, who will go into the cesspool with the child. We'll get into that place of the child. As Mekabel, the child be Ahava, Kamoishahu, Kamoishahi. Even if the child is not a Talmud Chacham, even if the kid did not turn out to be the way that the father wanted, or the way the mother was hoping for or expected, even if this child has done everything imaginable or unimaginable to go against everything that their mother believed in. Ba'asher hu sham, lo ma'astim, lo ga'altim, l'chaloisam. L'chaloisam, Chazal tells the Lashon of Kala, that no matter what you've done, you're still my Kala. And when Rashi tells us, Shkulim Heim, Chazal, Rashi means Chazal, to teach us Moshe and Aaron Moshe, Shkulim Heim. It means that we can't live unless we have leaders that are able to combine these two characteristics of Moshe and Aaron. As a people, we can't function. We're struggling desperately now. Although in every generation, Baruch Hashem, the Alman Yisrael we have, but we're struggling to connect to these kinds of leaders. And both Moshe and Aaron are shkulim, that means they're indispensable. But let's, Tzivishnuns, together ask the question, even though Rashi says, Shkulim Heim Ke'echad, they're like one, there is still an order to their appearance in our lives in the world. There is a Seder in the world. So who came into our lives first? Chavir. Who came into our lives first? Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron HaKohen. It's Mefurish in the Parasha. Moshe ben Shmoinim Shana v'Aaron ben Shalosh Shmoinim Shana v'Dabim el Par. Aaron came into the world first. The issue here is not age or chronology. Aaron came into our lives first. Moshe, when he was growing up in the palace, he was an adult. It was much later when he first joined us on our journey. But Aaron HaKohen was with us from the beginning, crying, teaching, talking, encouraging, chizik. So there is a Seder of Hashpah. There is a Seder of Hashpah when it comes to teaching. There is a Seder of Hashpah. One of the great problems that teachers have nowadays, or have always had in the classroom, is an oddity. There's a strange thing that I've heard so many times from new teachers, young teachers. Many times girls coming out of seminary, lovely, sweet young ladies coming out of seminary and talking to their students like tyrants. And in the teacher's room, you'll ask, like, what's the story with you? Like, why are your girls crying? And then this sweet, innocent seminary girl will say, I was taught that for the first few months you have to be really, really mean, or else you won't be able to teach. So I'm just following what my mean teachers told me. And I'm now giving it over to my students. Or else I won't be able to discipline them. They'll run all over me. What the Torah is telling us is that both of these ingredients are necessary, the father and the mother. Moshe emes v'seirosei emes. Morah hagodlos Moshe Rabbeinu fear and awe. But unless that fear is built upon an unbelievably healthy, shining, illuminating basis of unconditional, unbridled affection and warmth and love, that teacher will never succeed in raising that child. The teacher might be able to inform, might be a brilliant teacher, and that student will learn all kinds of information, but that's not the teacher you remember 30, 40, 50 years later who changed your life. It's not the teacher you remember who changed your life. The one who invited you for Shabbos, the one who spent some time with you, who saw that there's something bothering you, the one who took your hand in a record when nobody else was going over to you and grabbed you and took your hand in a dance and pulled you in. I remember many, many, many years ago, I'm talking about almost 40 years ago, a Maisa. And the impression that it left on a girl, this was a young woman who went through terrible sorrows, that she was tormented by her own father and brother. I don't want to go into anything more graphic than that. She was raised in a dysfunctional home and was tormented by her father and her brother over the course of her entire adolescence. She was tortured by her father and her brother. Hashem Yirach. And she somehow survived, went through terrible stuff, years of therapy, has a beautiful family of her own. She lives in Muncie. She became religious. She returned to Yiddishkeit. She has a family in Muncie. And I saw her many years later and I asked her, how did you survive? She might think her answer was, it's because of that radak that I heard from the teacher in the 8th grade. That's not what she said. And it wasn't from the Ramban that she heard in the 11th grade, although all of that is gewaldig. That's not how she survived. She said when I was going through my most difficult time, it was in high school. And there was a rabbi, an old rabbi in the school, who somehow saw that I was tzibrochen, that I was broken. He found out when it was my birthday, and he opened up his briefcase and he took out a birthday cake and he lit candles and he sang a solo to me, happy birthday to you. And that's why I'm a Jew. And that's why I was able to eventually survive, get married and have my own family. I'm raising in an entirely different way than my father raised me. Not because she remembered the pshat, although all that's absolutely non-negotiable and necessary. The question is what comes first. You could be very demanding of a student. You could have great expectations of a student. People think that nowadays that you're not allowed to ask a student to do anything. You can't give homework. You can't expect a kid to take a test. You could demand a lot from students, and the students will perform to the best of their ability, as long as Aaron came first. You understand what I'm saying, Kevin? As long as that child feels that he or she is loved, respected. You can have a Moshe Rabbeinu and Abba who's toiveya, who's demanding and exacting, but only if there's a mother whose love is unconditional, who's infinite. And therefore, in the Seder HaDvarim, Aaron came before Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu's teachings are built upon that world of Levarches Amo Yisrael B'Ahav. And we understand, therefore, that Hillel, when Hillel says in the Mishnah in the first parak, having a Talmidav Shel Aaron, he says, Oivus Abrius, at the end, Oivus Abrius and Makarvin, the Torah, Rav Kook Zechatzad, because the Rocha said, it doesn't say Almanas lekarven l'Torah, that you love your students in order to bring them closer to Torah. Rav Kook said, it says, Oiheves habriyos, a natural overflowing love, not a conditional love, not I'm going to show this student love in order that I can be mekarev. Because the kids can see right through that kind of love. They see right through that teacher, they see right through that parent. It's when there's a natural overflowing, real love and ahava. Not almanas lekarven l'Torah. And you can't be taught that in seminary. You can't be taught that in yeshiva either. These are the guidelines of how to love. You have it or you don't have it. You can work on it, you can improve it. But if it's not there, you can't fake it. So here's where we come to the mystery of my brothers and sisters in West Hempstead. I have to understand this strange phenomenon of this community that lives in New York. It's a short distance from the 5 towns. It's also a wonderful community, Baruch Hashem, filled with Torah and Yerushalayim, wonderful people. But it's like you were produced in some sort of a laboratory somewhere else. And again, it's a generalization. Some of you are probably not that fantastic. My experience has been gewaldig. That's my wife, and I've shared this with many people, and we all talk about it. Lower East Side and West Hempstead. It's interesting. It's an interesting thing. Now, if anybody is from the Lower East Side and moved to West Hempstead, that's double jeopardy. Because there was a Jew here who spent many, many years in this shul, however it was refurbished. I was here when I was a kid, and there was a Rav before, Rabbi Gold, who I remember as well. He was zeicher for such manhigim. Rav Kelemer was not just a Talmud Chacham, he was a Goller. So, Mishichma v'mala, all of the other Rabbanim, everybody else knew that he was in a class of his own. He was different. He was just different. He wasn't like the rest. Everybody's wonderful, but he was different. And there was that Moshe Rabbeinu of who he was. And all that means, and all the stories. I was talking to my cousin the other day, he was sharing with me a couple of beautiful stories. And I've heard over the years, the learning, Moshe Rabbeinu, Yikoyev Hadinas Ahar, the Paskin, but I know, and without knowing you personally, only maybe some of you, that's not enough to explain how you turned out the way you turned out. And that's not enough to explain a Jew, a Tzadik like Rabbi Yehuda Kelemer. Not enough. The story one of the stories that Jeff shared with me was about how one of the kids wasn't feeling well, had the tonsils, and it was in the hospital, and Rabbi Kelemer went to visit the kid in the hospital and said, don't worry, you're going to be okay. And you know, ice cream is good for that. And then a few days later, Rabbi Kelemer shows up at the house with an ice cream. Those are the stories that embarrass all the other Rabbanim. You understand? I'll give an Aish that somebody should get ice cream. You understand? I could also give an Aish to get ice cream. I don't show up at the ice cream. So I think, Heather, that's the mystery of West Hempstead. He was able to have a leader, a Rebbe, a Rav, a Mani, who had in him father and mother, Abba and Ima, Moshe and Aaron, schooling, balanced in such a remarkably beautiful, harmonious, synchronized way in that person of Kelemer, in that Tzadik of Kelemer, such a balance. So allow me to end with one short story that I've told in many, many places in the world. My wife found in a sefer around 7 years ago that there was a Talmid Chacham in Bnei Brak who told over the story in my name, and he said in the name of Moshe Weinberg from New York, Zichron Levracha. So I knew somebody that lived near him and contacted him to say, Baruch Hashem, I'm okay. There was no reason to put me away just because of the Maisa. I guess he liked the story so much, he figured it must be somebody dead who told it. But I'll share this with you. Some of my Chaverim here know this story. I've told it many, many times. But it's a story that's unforgettable. Listen in a real way. After we were married, we were living in Queens, and I was learning in an afternoon kollel from Mechanchim. Some of you might know where Paris Starmer is, all goes on, I'm very close to in Queens. Big Talmid Chacham and Tzadik. And we had a kollel, and we had a bunch of Mechanchim who were learning there to help us manage, because we were all teaching in the morning, to help us with Parnasa. We were also had an opportunity to learn in the afternoon. We had a very nice chaver there. And there were also some elderly gentlemen who came to learn. And there's we would switch off to giving a daf yomi for the older chaver. And one of them, I'll just say his first name was Binyamin, Rabbi Binyamin, was an alter Litvishi, an old Lithuanian Jew, but the real McCoy, with all of the nobility and gentleness and love of Torah. He was at that time already well into his 90s. I could that when he would say, I want to tell you something I remember for Reb Chaim, we would say Reb Chaim Velozhina, and he would say, nay, Reb Chaim Brisker. But if you know history, like it wasn't like it was that far off, you know. Say Reb Chaim Brisker, nay. And he remembered Reb Aaron Cutler playing with Reb Shneur, throwing him up in the air. He was an old person. He was not a Talmid Chacham. He loved learning, but he wasn't a lamdan. He came every day to learn, and we loved him. He used to switch off taking him to his doctor appointments. He had a very hard life. He lost his wife, Siberia, kids. I'll look at the Zach, you understand? So once it was Chanukah, we were getting ready to go light candles. And we asked him, Rabbi Binyamin, tell us a ma'aseh. So Rabbi Binyamin says, what do you, I'm not a chassid, I don't tell stories, I don't have to. So he said, no, tell a ma'aseh from you, you're a ma'aseh. So he said like this, listen to this. He said, listen, when I was a young man, you know that I'm not a lamdan, and I wasn't a lamdan back then either. But my father wanted so badly for me to go to a big yeshiva and to learn in a chassid yeshiva. So he saved every kopek, every penny he saved to hire a Talmid Chacham in our village to teach me a piece of Gemara with good, you know, the Rashi and Tosfos and a couple of kashas and a Pnei Yehoshua, you know, to say over a blood Gemara. And he sent me to go learn, to go be tested. You first had to be fahered in the yeshiva in Grodno. So who remembers who was the yeshiva in Grodno? Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon Shkop, my Rebbe's Rebbe. Reb Shimon. My Rebbe's Reb David Lipschitz. Reb Shimon Shkop. So Rabbi Yehuda told us, look, I didn't want to go to this yeshiva. I just wanted to stay home with my friends. I don't want to go to the yeshiva. Well, my father wanted so badly. He was saving the money, and he had this melamed for a whole year, was teaching me, because I have a thick head, he said. I was going the whole year over and over the Gemara, the Rashi, the Tosfos, the Kasha, the Teretz, the whole year, again and again. Again, I memorized this piece of learning. And then my father, my mother gave me a little food, and they put me on a wagon, and they sent me to go to Grodno, which was quite a distance from where we lived. And there was only enough money to get me to the next village. And he said, over there, you'll meet other Jews. You'll find a way to get there. That's what he said. It took me 3 weeks till I got to Grodno. Half starving, same clothing. I got to Grodno. I get to Grodno. And the rule is you can't get into the yeshiva. You first have to be fahed. You have to be tested. So the test was by the Rashiva himself, by Reb Shem. So he said, I was terrified. And the whole 3 weeks I'm going over this Gemara. And I come there and I ask some Jew that's walking, where's Reb Shem, where's the Rosh Hashiva's house? And he said, I'm davening, maybe he's away someplace, And I knock on the door, and I was hoping at least Kalpach, the Rebbe, will answer the door. Because Reb Shimon himself answers the door. I'm standing there like a chicken before Kaparis, you understand? And Reb Shimon says, who are you? And it was freezing out. He says, come, who are you? And I said, my name, he said, Benjamin, so-and-so. Oh, yeah, from this village. Yeah, I was expecting you. And then he said to me the most horrible thing. Reb Shimon said, Chabad, I have for you 2 questions in learning. So Benjamin said to us, that's not how the game goes. I only know one Gemara. And I worked a year on that Gemara. I don't know other stuff like they asked me. I don't know anything. He didn't say that. He just was thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. And Reb Shimon says, I have for you 2 kashas. He said, I felt like the tears were coming up. I didn't know what to do. Reb Shimon said, the Erste Kashi is the first question. When was the last time you had a hot meal? The Zweite Kashi is, the second Kashi is, when was the last time you slept in a warm bed? He said, the Rebbe was away someplace at a family simcha. Reb Shimon put on an apron. That's what he told us. And Reb Shimon made supper for me. And he put me to bed like a little child. And he said, we'll talk and learning next week. Shluf. He said, I went through Siberia. I lost my kids. My wife died. He had a life of terrible sorrows. You want to know why I still come to learn? You want to know why I put on tefillin? You want to know why I'm a Jew? From Reb Shimon's 2 kashas. Like the Yid. That's why I'm still a Jew. And that's why this Kehillah is going to go together, Yerushalayim, as a Kehillah, as friends, as good friends, the students and the children of the Tzadik, Rabbi Yehuda Kelemer. His memory should be a blessing to each and every one of you. We should be zeicher at the time of Akitz Varan El Sheikh and after that he should be able to return to us. That we should be zeicher to be together, all of us together in Yerushalayim, the Lashon Amitis, and Benjamin Amen.
Thank you so much for those truly empowering, inspiring, encouraging words. They will all continue in Mirz Hashem for many years, as the Rav said, together, ba'achtos, b'shalom, b'shalva, to continue to perpetuate Kelemer's memory for many years to come in good health. Thank you all for coming on Zoom and live. Have a good evening.